Hi, I'm Rachel Friend. I'm the CEO of W Communications. We're an agency that connects brands to the heart of culture to develop impact for our brands and our clients. Today, I'd like to introduce you to two of my friends and colleagues, Scott Dimbleby, our Creative Director. Scott.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Scott Dimbleby. I've been at W for nearly a decade now, and my role is effectively to, as Rachel says, and we're going to talk about today, very much connecting brands to and within the context of culture. I've been very lucky enough to work along some amazing brands along the journey, and we're going to talk you through not only some of our work, but some of the amazing work that we've been seeing the industry doing, not only just through the lens of Cannes, but sort of the wider industry too.
Hi, I'm Ian Loughran. I'm the CCO and co-founder of Idal, which is essentially a next-generation talent management agency, and I'm readdressing how talent and brands marry in the future.
Welcome to you both. Thank you very much for joining our panel today. So, subject of our panel today is all around brands and authenticity. For now, brands are harnessing cultural authenticity to really deliver impact that changes attitudes and lives. I think over the years we've used Cannes as a fantastic barometer to see how trends have been evolving, and there couldn't have been a more seismic shift in trends that we've had in the last 12 months due to the global pandemic, and we'll be exploring the impact of that shift on how that's impacted on culture. So today we're going to assess the landscape of how brands act and connect with culture to get to the heart of issues and collaborate with activists and talent and celebrities to build powerful, authentic and purpose-driven campaigns. So why don't I get us kicked off? Sure. Why don't we explore some of those recent trends?
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. As I said, we've been working with W over a decade, and having had great experience in connecting brands in and around culture, I think Cannes is always, really emblematic of the direction that, the world's going in, I suppose, particularly in the industries that we work in at the moment. And I think, we've talked for long about purpose and cause and how brands have worked within that context. And I think, you could really see it come to the fore in 2018, but I think particularly 2019, when I actually was lucky enough to be there, that you could really see it come to the fore. And there was some really amazing work at that point that particularly stands out for me. The likes of IKEA's Disables, some of the work that Velux did, the Craft Now Pay Later piece, which, all of those were really great examples of where, brands started to put their money where their mouth was. And I suppose either solve societal problems and also, in the context of the Craft one, solve problems that actually governments were unable to do. And I thought, that was a really great point. But I think as an industry, we all talked at length. I remember having conversations out there like, was it tokenistic? Was this just a fleeting moment in time? But I think what we've really seen, and I know we're going to talk about it slightly later, is I think because of the world we now find ourselves in, like that isn't going away, and sort of rightly so too. And I think if you look at some of the work, certainly some of my favourite pieces from this year, and obviously from this week at the moment, again, we're seeing that same piece and solving problems, but I actually think it's going further. Like, I actually think it's at the point now where, we're tackling taboos that I think even a few years ago wouldn't have been done before. I think my two favourite pieces, and I think two great examples are, the bread exam, the Lebanese bread example, and breaking down the taboos of breast cancer awareness in Lebanon, and also as a historian myself, the N23 piece around actually tackling Stalinist history and Russia's actual own history, and the piece around the perfume shop and physically being able to shut that down. I think that's a really great case in point of how far we've really come. And I don't think it's a trend anymore. I think we can hopefully we can sort of say that this is something that's going to reside within what we do, and actually we can make brands and businesses money, but actually at the same time we can actually do the world some good whilst we're doing it. Yeah,
and what does that really mean? Thank you, Scott. What does that mean, Ian, in terms of talent and celebrity?
Well, I mean, following on from that, I think essentially what is happening is talent historically has always been a two-dimensional representation of what the brand thinks people should be buying, what the consumer thinks that they should be buying. Whereas nowadays, I think what we're seeing is definitely a much more rounded view of an individual. I work with an incredible young lady called Ajak Deng, who's one of the world's top supermodels, but it struck me that, as an agent, we take these talent and we put them on a pedestal, and all of a sudden we expect them to operate and function as they normally do, when in actual fact, no one is portraying the backstory behind it, and no one is communicating. You know, especially with the invention of social media, there is an obligation also to the followers of the people that we're working with. And I think for brands now, especially when they look at talent, etc., like a Jack was always just a face on the cover of Vogue or in a campaign or whatever. However, the reality behind the situation is vastly different. You know, there's an escape from a home country. There's the refugee camp. There's there's a huge backstory there, and I think COVID has acted as a catalyst for this essentially. But I think now what brands need to do is just really tap into the stories and listen to the people that they are working with, because the stories that resonate far further than they used to.
Yes, absolutely, and those backstories are fundamental to that. So, Scott, I mean, obviously the pandemic has changed everything. So
we're sat here for a start.
We are. Yeah, Brighton's great. It's fantastic. What impact do you think it's really had?
You know, I think Ian nailed it. You know, COVID being a catalyst, I think has only further accelerated, you know, this sense of wanting, and, you know, and again, rightly so, doing good for people. I think, you know, it's really delivered a sense of humanity for lots of us, I think, on a personal level, but really on a professional level. I think, you know, it's done lots of things. It's really taken down the veil. I think, you know, if you talked about in social media, you know, we were almost at peak influencer before that, and it was about as beautiful as it could possibly get. It really felt like everyone being locked in their homes really sort of took that away. So, from whether we're talking about the likes of Eva Longoria, that was very gloriously showing her grey hair, you know, in spots on TV. You know, Vogue decided to put the everyday heroes on the fronts of their cover, so working for TfL. You know, the Postwoman. You know, and you know, even to slightly more ridiculous things. And I've been talking about this for a while, but Rachel always nudges me for being a fan of Joe Wicks. But I think, you know, but I think there's a point in that. You know, he farted live on camera, which I still think was one of the funniest things.
And you don't stop going on about it.
I don't, but I think that, you know, but I think that's a real sign of, you know, in years past that would have been edited and would have been cut out, and that wasn't, and that's really embraced. And I think that real sense of brands and everybody feeling comfortable of talking, you know, about us as being humans on a real human level. You know, Adidas did the same thing. You know, one of our clients looking at, you know, athletes being at home kicking around toilet rolls, or, you know, running up and down the stairs rather than being in beautiful gyms, looking beautiful makeup all the time. And, you know, this whole sense of honesty has come through in so many different ways. You know, when we're making things, production values were reduced for a while. Maybe they're changing slightly now, but, you know, we were seeing adverts that were made on people's phones. Maybe we saw too many of them in the end, but, you know, shot on Zoom, all of those sorts of things. I think what was amazing and is, again, now is it's allowed imperfection to continue to be celebrated in the right way. I think, you know, it's becoming much more coming to the fore and becoming something really interesting.
Yeah, and Ian, that's obviously had an impact in your world, the imperfection.
Yeah, but I think there was just such a disassociation before as well. Like, it got to a point, there was saturation point, you know, and you look at Victoria's Secrets as a prime example. It got to a point where not even the models looked like the models in the campaigns. You know, they looked like, when they walked that catwalk, they looked like that for 1 week of their lives, and there were pizzas waiting for them when they came off the runway. So I think ultimately, when you start, Ashley Graham started to change the conversation when she first came out, and it was about stretch marks, and it was about bruising from underwiring of bras, and it was about, you know, cellulite and this and that, because people are sick of seeing something which isn't aspirational, it's completely unobtainable. And I think that what has really helped. And obviously, you know, being stuck in your knickers in your living room during COVID for so long, people just gave up with the airs and the graces. And I think the reality has started to seep in, and it's a blessing.
Yeah, so the veil's come down.
Finally.
Humanity, imperfection, thank God, real people in the end. And we're talking about real issues, and that was something I think we wanted to explore a little bit as well. You know, issues are now absolutely part of and our culture.
Yeah, I think so. You know, we were talking about it through the lens of I suppose, of me and growing up and being just about being a millennial, just about sliding in there. And, you know, when we grew up, the way you sort of identify as an individual, as a person, I suppose, which, you know, lends itself to where you come to from a cultural perspective, was done through your passions, you know, what you loved, what you listened to, like what music genre you listened to, were you a skater, you know, were you really into sport? And, you know, whilst they're still around and they exist, actually the way that specifically more Gen Zs tend to align is it becomes way more issue-centric. The way they view the world is completely different. They align with, with something that they believe in, be that a cause or say as an issue, whether that's around sexual orientation or race, or climate or around politics. Like that almost becomes first and foremost, and then everything else sits around that. And I think, what that's really done is, activism is the strongest end of that, and the strongest end of that word. But, that sense of being a human first has really sort of, as I keep using the same term, but has really come to the fore and is really central to that. And I think, that's really bled over into mainstream culture, and you can see it. And I think, for me, the best example, a really great example of that, and it feels quite timely as it's going on at the moment, but if you look at football as being, a huge mainstay across the world wherever you go, never before has it become, so issue-centric in itself. The last season we've been seeing the Premiership taking the knee in its stand. We've seen England now doing that through the tournament, and no one else does that. We recently saw Germany in the Allianz Arena change to its rainbow, much to FIFA's dismay. And even looking through into individuals, your Ronaldos and your Pogbas of the world that have shunned Coke very actively, and Pogba did too with alcohol through his religious beliefs. Like that never used to happen before. It was relatively anodyne, and everyone just sort of towed the line because of the sponsors, as we talked about. And whilst they are very much taking issue with that, there's an interesting jeopardy there because outside of them wanting to sponsor football in a big way like that, for a fact that outside of that shot where Ronaldo's there, Coke are working on a cause and issue campaign, and also that Heineken are too. So it feels interesting that they're not willing to engage on one level, but yet they are on another. And I just think the fact that the biggest footballers in the world, who for a long time wouldn't have stood up or stood with something or showed their personal beliefs and what they are as a human, I think that's a really interesting case in point to show where we're up to.
Yeah.
And I think one of the we've found personally, I suppose in terms of football, the work we've been doing with Grenfell Athletic, which is for anyone who doesn't know, is basically is an amateur Sunday league football side that was set up out as a result of the tragedy in 2017. And what we found with that is we were able to find an issue that we as Londoners felt so heartfelt about, and it caused us all so much issue and angst. Understanding it at a real human level, was we were able to use that in itself to actually help fund the future of the club. So we created the football shirt alongside our friends at Brothers and Sisters, and then actually used that as an emblem and as a sign of the future and of real interest. And we were able to find 72 individuals to show the 72 that unfortunately lost their lives. But we identified those because of something that they believed in. They believed that those in and around Grenfell had been wronged in some way, or shared a common belief in that sport could be a positive force for good. And I think, in years past, that wouldn't necessarily have been able to be the case, because you wouldn't have been able to identify who those people were because they don't physically show it. Whereas the likes of, we went and worked with Wretch 32 and even Noel Gallagher and Damon Albarn, like they've all been outspoken about something in their lives. And I think that, for me, is a show of how that's really sort of bled into mainstream culture, when some of the biggest names in sport and entertainment are actually really identifying with something that for us shows that is what contemporary culture really is. And so that's why it's important that we really recognise that.
And just tell me, because it was a campaign that I know you personally worked on, and it's a big passion of yours. So just harnessing those celebrities, that talent, all of those guys, what was the impact of that campaign? It
was really amazing. For a club that normally 10 people and a dog go and watch, we were able to sell like nearly 1,400 shirts in 24 hours. And raise like £30,000, for a club that genuinely no one had ever heard of. And its impact's really been felt for the club. They've recently been able to go and work with some hopefully much bigger brands in the future. It looks like Nike wants to be able to invest on a much longer period of time to help them fund a women's team. Cadbury's are now becoming involved in terms of helping them fund the future as well. I think it was just a really amazing indication of where you can utilise headline talent and really big individuals to promote something that was tiny. There was no real reason why all these people should get behind a club that is in W5, as I say, that 17 men play for every single Sunday. But because there was a central cause and an issue at its heart that people believe in, that they very publicly stand with and against, then actually it made it entirely possible.
Yeah. And Ian, just coming on to that, because I know, a lot of the way that you've built your agency model, it's a completely different approach, isn't it?
I think people are looking for the humanity in things nowadays, and it's about touching things on a different level, which is why this kind of campaign was so successful and so many people got involved with it. It's because it's no longer good enough just to say, right, I want somebody who's 5'10", 34, 24, 34. It's not about that anymore. And I think the old days of looking at a model agency's website and hovering over someone's face and seeing the size of their arse it's outdated now. It's the year 2021. So we've tried to restructure things, and as Scott was just saying, like, people are. The generation nowadays, it's about causes that are close to their heart. They don't really care about the brand so much anymore. They may happen to drink Coca-Cola, but at the end of the day, it's not. They're not buying Coca-Cola because they're being told to buy it. So what we're trying to do now as well is, instead of looking through and objectifying people as an agency would normally do, you can search for somebody who is an LGBTQ plus activist. You can search for somebody who is, a mental health activist, a yoga person. You can search for somebody who's into dance. It's about searching for the humanity in people rather than the size of their bum.
That is so refreshing. And clearly developed out of years of frustration within the industry. But also, I think you've seen a real opportunity. And Ian, maybe you could just tell us a little bit. I know we were talking earlier about some of the conversations that you've had with models as you've been scouting, and how you've unearthed some of those stories.
Perhaps it's funny because as an agent in the fashion industry, you typically try and shove whatever person it is into either a round hole or a square hole, and that you try and pigeonhole somebody to become either editorial or commercial. Whereas when you actually sit down and get to know people, like I chased some poor girl down the street about a year ago on Tottenham Court Road, and it turns out she is a neuroscientist who is researching schizophrenia via advances in hallucinogens and psilocybin and ketamine, which is just. And then there's me trying to shove her in a magazine. It's like, okay, hold on, we're doing something wrong here, and the industry's doing something wrong. There's a beautiful girl that I look after called Yuta, who's just finished a TED Talk about whether Africans are part of a global citizenship. There is an artist I work with called Daniel Lismore, who is talking about the rise in the new NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, and the sustainability questions surrounding that. I think if brands are aware that people are not commodities, they are people, then the conversation changes.
Yeah, amazing. And so, Scott, just coming on to that, something that I think we've been kicking around a little bit is, there's a demand that we want brands to inspire us rather than we have to aspire to be like the face of that brand or what that brand stands for.
Yeah, I think so. It's at the same level. I think going back to Ian's point, what we talked before is, I think, we've come back to the point on talking to people on a human level rather than just pushing product in their face, the entire time. And it does feel like it's been consumer driven. I think none of us want to be sold to anymore. I certainly don't. I think some of the best advertising we've seen at Cannes in recent years and also this year, none of it directly sells to you. You can still have beautiful art direction, but fundamentally, I still think it's all about the story and how it's built out and talking to people on a very personal level. Like, it doesn't feel top down anymore. It does feel like that ad model and even that PR model has really shifted. I think because of that, the opportunity for people to curate every single aspect of their life and really engage on topics in really specific ways, it's really sort of changing. It's people with real stories and experiences that really land now. Rather than people that just look beautiful, you go, oh, you dress great, or you got a great haircut. The people that people identify with now, or society identifies with, are those that have a story and maybe stand against something. And I think there is one story that resides for the last 12 months. I think embodies that perfectly. Which is Marcus Rashford. As someone that lived the unfortunate cause that he stands with and against in sort of food poverty, there is no better person to be poster child, if you will, but to do so in a way where people can actually understand the problems that they're going through and how really important it is to do that. And I think the other thing that's come with that, and on the real human level, is it's really opened up the opportunity for everybody to feel comfortable, be able to talk about those conversations. in years past, people wouldn't have felt comfortable, and they still don't, to a full degree, but better than they ever did, to maybe say that they're struggling to feed their family or they're struggling to feed their kids at breakfast. But because they can see someone like Marcus Rashford has done that and has actively come out and done so, it makes that conversation way easier for people to be able to interact with, and then also maybe for brands to help try and step in and solve some of those problems. They've got as bigger budgets as some governments have, so why shouldn't we be trying to help solve those in that way? And I suppose again it's that element of taboo that we were sort of talking about, and I think we've done some work at W in terms of that as well. This year we've been very much working in the context of period poverty with Hey Girls and breaking down that as a taboo. We're doing lots of work with the Social Mobility Foundation in the background, in terms of that and being a taboo and trying to help further people to come even more into our industry, but full time into positions they deserve to be in, but maybe because of their background have not had the opportunity. Yeah, and also I suppose that comes all the way full circle back to the bread exam example I gave with the Lebanese piece as well from this year's Cannes. That whole idea around breaking down taboos through talking to people at a really humanistic level. I think it's so so important and so key.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned Marcus Rashford though, because I think it's amazing what that campaign has done and what he has done, but I think it's such a sad state of affairs that the government are so tied up in their own politics that it takes Marcus Rashford to step forwards and actually start to make the change.
Yeah.
And I think this is where it's quite interesting to see what's happening now as well, because I think it's a point where the brands and the talent that they use and work with, I think it's a chance to move things forward in a different way where governments can't.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so to sum up, we've got lots of big themes going on in here. We have try not to perfect the imperfection, humanity, breaking down taboos. I wonder if you might just sort of start to sum up a little bit some of the conversation that we've been having.
Sure. I think for me, I think the clear direction that we've seen is, as we say, there is this idea of humanity and talking at a human level for lots of brands. There's still lots that don't do it, but I do think that's the way that the consumer is now expecting that we should do it. And I think it's great that we, as an industry and brands, can really help solve problems. There's no reason why we can't really do that. And I think that's really amazing. I suppose as a creative, the thing that excites me is continuing to maybe see how far the braveness does go. Like, how many taboos can we break?
Yeah.
Like, how far can we really push it to that point? Obviously, what you don't want it to do again is it goes so far it becomes tokenistic. 'Cause it feels like we've actually broken down that barrier now. But it could be pushed so far that it almost does become a parody of itself, and that's where we don't want to end up.
Yeah, I wonder if we can just explore just for a couple of minutes what authenticity really means then. If what we're trying to do is to break down barriers, break down taboos, then Ian, I've sort of turned to you. When you're looking at casting people into campaigns, what might be the criteria that you're looking for from a brand where you would actually give permission for them to engage with some of the people you work with?
Well, I think we have to remember nowadays that people come with their own causes and they come with their own backstory and they come with their own ideologies, So just trying to say, a brand wants to tick this demographic off their list isn't acceptable anymore. I think they need to understand which communities are out there and which communities need help, and then to work on it from that level and to start to support them in that way via the talent that have their own communities already built.
So you would demand that brands actually do more than just put a face.
I don't think marketing should just be for profit's sake anymore. I think it's the change which has happened recently can actually extend further down the line, and I think it's about actually making active change with a social consciousness now.
Yeah. And Scott, do you have more to add into there, just in terms of how, when we're working with brands, how might we advise brands to to make this change and be bold?
I think it definitely becomes part and parcel of if it's a new business response, it's formative within one of those. But also, when we're advising clients, the amount of work we've done with Unilever over the years, they've always been standout in terms of doing it. Where every single brand they have has something at the core of it that effectively is doing some form of good. I think that should be applied to anybody and everybody. It shouldn't have to become a rule as such. But as Ian says, there's no reasons why we as marketeers and just sounds ridiculous, but on a very human level, why we can't help each other out in a better way. Like money can still be made. Obviously, that still needs to be the key. But there's no reason why we can't help. We're not going to be able to go and create world peace, or anything as ridiculous or as lofty as that. But there are definitely opportunities for people with huge sway, huge pockets, and huge teams of really hyper talented people and really intellectual people that we can't help overcome some of those really those problems that we see every day.
Yeah. And Ian, just coming back to you, I'm thinking about some of the people that are on your books. Are they looking for long-term relationships with brands and causes to actually have that long-term effect?
Yes, absolutely. And I also think it's about sponsorship nowadays as well, rather than traditional advertising or other means. I think it's about identifying exactly what communities they're working with, what messaging they're working with, and what causes, and then saying, right, how do we assist them into pushing this message out further? Exactly what's happened with the Grenfell team.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Well, look, I'd like to thank you both very much for your participation in our panel discussion this morning. I think it's really clear that the world has seismically changed. It is very refreshing that the veil has come down. It is very refreshing that we have real, true authenticity coming through. I'm delighted, Ian, that you have broken the mold yourself and set up an agency where the search function is different. Actually, even on your website, the search function is different, isn't it?
Yes, everything's different. And the website went live this morning, so if there's any hiccups, don't hate me.
The veil has come down and you're being true and authentic.
Exactly. My stretch marks are showing.
Wonderful. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.